You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome, everyone, to this Monday, December the 21st. Incredible winter show. I am joined today by Laura Lee Solomon and Peter Moon, two of the incredible participants that are going to be on our time travel webinar. My co-host Kathy Ma is in Hong Kong right now interviewing several Feng Shui masters. So the next show that you get, you are going to be hearing live recordings that were direct from ancient Feng Shui masters who operate in the city of Hong Kong. So please, everyone, look forward to that next episode. So Laura Lee Solomon, Peter Moon, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Peter. We're glad to be here.
I'm glad you too. Peter, how you doing today?
I'm fine. You mean to say thank you, Andrew?
Yes.
Oh, I was... Hey, I've had a lot of things happening.
Exactly. It's been a fast-moving morning. You know, all those things that are going on. So Laura Lee and Peter Moon have both been part of a webinar along with Douglas Dietrich that we are recording that's strictly on time travel and in the empowerments of these different concepts that are going around. Laura Lee and Peter, you know, what are your experience so far? You know, we had 2 pre-record sessions. So any hints that you want to give?
Well, clearly you have to decide what time you're really in before you start talking.
That's true. What time you are in.
That's a good point. And, of course, Douglas, I was very fascinated by when Douglas started to talk about his reading of the Defense Department files and reading about Dr. David Anderson. I thought that's interesting, and I think that will certainly whet people's appetites to hear what he has to say.
Yes, we are giving people over 4 hours of material.
One question, Andrew.
Sure.
I got a couple of questions on Facebook saying, well, I signed up for the seminar. How do I pay the $15 for the advanced price? Have you set up the link for that?
The link for that will be set up once the email is ready to go out. So that's all simultaneous on Union. So that'll happen sometime in the next 24 hours.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah. Good.
And we've already had 96 people sign up for it. So we are doing really good there. That's even before we put up a pay button.
Great.
So everyone that wants to be a part of the time travel webinar, you can go to galacticnewsnetwork.com. It's all one word, Galactic News Network. And there you'll see the opt-in page, and it tells you everything about it. And right away you're going to get a free video from myself, and then you'll be getting one from Peter in the second sequence of emails that go through, all explaining about time travel.
You know, I should also bring up this, Andrew. I just did a 2-hour TV interview this morning with Kira Starr Ellis. You're familiar with her?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, she said hello, and she interviewed me for 2 hours. She said it'll be up in a few days, and I was able to go sort of from the beginning of my work and encapsulate it in a way that was very unique because she was a very good interviewer, and we didn't get to the Romanian parts, but it was a very good interview. So I wanted to mention Carrie, because she said hello to you, and for those who follow her, I will be doing a 2-hour television interview with her, which will show up in the next couple of days.
Very cool.
The other part was she threw in Roswell into the context of some statement she made, and afterwards I told her about Douglas Dietrich. I sent her a YouTube of Douglas's presentation on Roswell, and I think it will be fascinating if she's not been opened up to him, and that'll be very interesting if she can interview him as well.
Oh yeah, the cracker can.
And she's a very I guess what you call wide open and well trafficked person. So
she could interview her too.
Listening to Douglas will reorient you. So
yes,
true north.
True north.
Where the land of bull hockey does not stand.
No, we try to sweep it up off the Facebook page too.
Yeah, I know. Lots of bull hockey on the Facebook page. Lots of bull puckies.
Yeah. However, there is among some of us an effort to find things of relevance, even importance, and it doesn't get put up there unless it is that. It isn't just someone advertising that they're doing healings now, or someone posting a meme. There's substance behind what a lot of people are posting, and I found a really outstanding Facebook page, actually, not website, that was doing Kabbalistic stuff recently. So he puts out fantastic columns. I shared one of them over to my Facebook page happily, and I would encourage everyone who messes around with Facebook to actually look at it. It's called the Sun Keepers.
It's a Facebook.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah.
It's a Facebook page?
It is a Facebook, no, correct title, The Path of the Sun Keepers. And he's doing some cool things with Kabbalah that worth noting. And it isn't a column he picked up on the web someplace. It's an original writing. So that's always encouraging when that happens.
Well, anytime you find those original writings, you know that you're running across something special.
Yeah.
What I find, I did The Path of the Sun Keepers, and what I see are photos. Okay, there's the timeline. And he posts things on the timeline.
It's posted on the timeline, and it is associated with a photo, but it's a long column associated with the photo.
No, excuse me. When I punched in the URL, I got to the photo section of his Facebook page.
Okay.
A little bit. So his data stream is on the timeline, is what I'm asking you. His data stream is on the timeline. As opposed to, does he have a page where, he explains, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing?
Oh, I haven't had the opportunity to look at it at that length. I do hold down a regular job. But yeah, I found a good column there, and I shared it, and I wanted to mention it because I thought it was a good site. But by all means, anybody who wants to check it out further can and should. So I'm not sure about his data stream, is what I'm saying.
Well, it looks to me like, and it does look like an interesting site, but he'll make posts and then he'll have an article on something.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's indexed. And
no, I don't think it is.
And that would be nice if it was, but whatever.
It would be nice if Douglas's was, and I hope to do that with his website eventually.
And that'll come in due time.
Yeah. That's a painful process.
So, Laura, I want to ask you a question on the time travel webinar. So what are your impressions of time, and give people a little sample of what you're going to be presenting?
Well, time is a function of consciousness. And as such, our consciousness can expand to incorporate more of it than in the slice of the immediate now that we are dealing with, and respond to a bigger section of what time might be, simply because of an expanded state of consciousness, a higher perspective, as it were. And that comes with practice and attunement to the source. It is byproduct of meditation, and advanced meditators tend to have an awareness that responds to things well before events happen. And that was something I was picking up not too long ago in Dean Radin's book, Conscious Universe.
Yes, that was a very good book.
It was a very good book, and I was looking at it again in terms of the aspect of precognition he was talking about. And it really isn't sensing something before it's happened. It's just an expanded horizon of the now.
Right. It's taking the perspective of the universal being that we are, allowing information to flow without a restriction of time.
Right. Because time is sort of an artificial restriction in a lot of ways. So time travel might really amount to whatever lets us change our mind about what we're manifesting now.
Yes, because as conscious manifesting beings made of photonic light and a shared reality of photonic light, because matter isn't technically real without us to observe it.
Yep. And it's that act of observation that confirms its reality and makes it seem solid to us. You know, we can touch it and interact with it because that's part of the construct of concrete solidness that is really part of the universal energy that's manifested there as a mirror for us.
Right.
It's
our continuous reflection back to us as part of the co-creation of the universal being. Yep.
Now,
but
go ahead.
Yeah, to deal with it as a reflection is another trick. When something's happening that's very frustrating or upsetting or has your attention pulled several different directions at once, you always have to kind of pull back and ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this now? Because rather than looking down a hall of mirrors, you need to make definite images if you're going to impact reality as a causal source in your reality. Otherwise, you're just kind of running with all sorts of little programs and trying to keep the plate spinning, as it were, according to the program. And that can keep you very busy, but it's not real productive.
Correct. Not very productive. So, Peter, why don't you bring in here and give people a little bit of a sample of time travel, the Peter Moon way?
Well, I was going to more do this by addressing a question. And it was sort of in reference to what Laura was talking about.
Go ahead, yeah.
But it's like when you think of DNA as a construct in the universe, and DNA is actually chemicals activating in a particular manner so as to animate matter and manifest consciousness in a particular way, which we would describe as life. The implication is that that matter does not have consciousness, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying is that when we get into DNA and we talk about the manifestation of time and conscious beings, we're exercising we're plugging into a stream of, I want to say, calculations and iterations and
emanation equations.
Yeah.
Yes.
The interesting thing about that, Peter, is that DNA is sort of functioning like an antenna. And it picks up a range of frequencies depending on the configuration of the DNA. And it's basically how light communicates with the body.
It also is a cipher that unpacks tremendous amounts of information that come from a different frequency of time.
Mm-hmm.
It is a technological vehicle that brings memories from one epoch to another.
Well, yes, in a lot of unseen and complex processes. What I was going to ask or suggest is that, you see, whether it's a worm or a microbe or whatever it is, certainly a human being, there is at some point we have to delineate into what do we call a being, a sentient being that is, by its manifestation, if not its nature, limited in its consciousness to that, not necessarily exclusively, but for most practical purposes, to that particular organism. So we have and in that limited consciousness of a creature or being, we have a part of the program ties to the entire schematic of existence. It's, in other words, within the construct of, you might say, the DNA of a human being, you might be able to reconstruct the entire cosmos, or at least have a mirror image representation of it with a corresponding ability to communicate with it if certain codes and whatnot are activated. Next person on the dock.
Very well
Well,
said.
yeah.
So quanta and the quantum interacting in the nexus points, and the different scales of evolution determine what stream of consciousness connects to the DNA and unlocks the particular code of experience.
Kabbalah talks about this principle of limitation as part of the natural order, of course, and that principle of limitation functions automatically for all forms of life, which are inherently sentient but not necessarily capable of self-awareness. They're sentient in a subconscious kind of way to us. But that force of limitation depicted in Key 15, normally labeled the devil, is something everyone self-conscious encounters and has to overcome the automatic responses to in order to be free to operate beyond it. So it's very much part of the ancient traditions. It's part of the Kabbalistic scheme of things. Key 15 has always been depicted as this monstrous figure with two humans chained to its altar, but they're not quite humans. They have aspects of bestiality about them, and it's those personal aspects of just race consciousness, let's say, the general background of our evolution that we have to take conscious control of, and like the myth of Hercules, Hercules as an infant strangling the serpents in his cradle, take that life force in hand and make it come around the bend and work in a consciously directed way. And that's what that's the process meditation starts. Now, how to make that into time travel, whatever kind of device or technology lets you reattune yourself quickly is going to give you the time travel experience.
And this is where I say the DNA is the time travel technology itself.
Yeah.
And it is a vehicle in which light can become very dense or very light based off of the experience that's going on. We are at a point where understanding the different levels of consciousness vehicles, our dreaming body is another form of light travel. We experience light in our dreams. And yet, how do those dream memories get downloaded into our physical body? There is a vehicle that holds our consciousness. And that's the consciousness that must experience the now at all times.
Right. As a working ekist, what happens, it kind of, you interpret it to yourself, but you meet parts of yourself and the limitations they experienced in their life experience that are still pertinent to you, the karmic stuff. And that karmic stuff lets you see where you're hung up from the past and work on that particular limitation.
Let me say something about the limitations. I was, after I finished with Carrie this morning, she mentioned to me, she was talking about the Aramaic language, which I was sort of talking to her, had a root earlier with the Romanian language, but she was saying that in Aramaic, the word for like Satan, whereas in our English language we call it adversary, she said it is resistance. It is resistance. So this reminds me of what Laura Lee is talking about with regards to blocking or limiting.
And so if we think of and this is very applicable to the Qigong that I practice. So when you can take the limits off of your physical energy and you can stand in proper alignment, energy will literally flow through you. And it can be quite magical. So once you get this flowing of energy that is outside the realm of, I guess, what you call average or ordinary experience, it is undamming the blocks that were just being talked about. And furthermore, it's very ironic that the word dam is related to, like, the dam that a beaver would build or to dam a river is very much like the state of being damned or damnation, where you're in a state of utter and complete resistance. And she was advocating the idea that it's all about resistance, and if you don't resist, we resist the divine in this idea. Now, DNA, we can go into a very interesting conversation on DNA if we begin to look at the prospect of what's sometimes errantly called the 23rd chromosome principle, or the 23rd gene pair, whereby humanity was once in possession of 24 gene pairs. The ordinary human DNA has 23 gene pairs, which are over 99% identical to a chimpanzee. But if we had 24 gene pairs, I have posited, and there's a lot of science to back this up, is that you can, as far as there having once been 24 gene pairs, but my idea is that if these things are all, it's like connecting, it's like rewiring the entire consciousness of the body so that you are literally completely undammed, unblocked up, and you would then have some of the paranormal functions, what are considered paranormal, that are really quite natural if we're functioning, and I guess what Carrie would call it, superhuman. And this is an idea of the potential. Now, when one is completely unblocked in their DNA, they have all of those codes. It's like a switchboard. And I would liken DNA not only to an antenna, but to a transceiver that can transmit, that can receive. And therefore, if it can do that, there's no reason it can't literally shift or literally shapeshift. And these are the full potentialities in the construct of DNA. Of course, when we build in resistance, we build in a configuration that one decides. All these decisions or programs are executed to put one into the shape of a species, into the shape of a particular strain of biochemical life, or to a full-fledged human being. So these are some of the constructs. When we consider time and this idea of the 24th gene pair, we have a consciousness that is completely, in an ideal state, completely unblocked and is completely receptive to the creation, the entirety of creation. So we would have the potential, and this is just one avenue towards discussing time travel, and it's an avenue that's life.
All right, that is our break. Everyone hold on for just 3 minutes, and we'll be back at the other side of the break. And the infamous Peter Moon, who was giving us an incredible stream of consciousness on DNA and the way the pairs of chromosomes come together in the 23rd and 24th slot. Peter, finish saying what you were saying.
Well, I kind of gave a little wrap up there, but talking about the idea that there were 24 originally, theoretically, and there's a lot of biology. I mean, I knew one of the best biologists, microbiologists in the I suppose you'd say in the world. I don't know. He passed away, but he said there was a lot of science to back up this idea of the 24th gene pair, and that it had a history in humanity, and that it had the potential to reconfigure. But he thought we should have, discussion groups on this. He thought it was so important. But in any case, we do have a history of ancient history. I've written about this in my book, The Montauk Book of the Living, whereby there is a lineage that is attributed to, I guess, the planet Mars, and of a blue race of Rh negative people that came from Mars, settled in the inner Earth regions because the outside sun was not compatible with their copper-based blood. And we have these ancient legends, and they emerged through blue-skinned people in the Celtic tradition, where the gods are blue, the Hindu tradition, the Egyptian tradition, where you'll see Isis as blue, and also the tradition of the Tuareg people of the Algerian desert, Saharan desert, in Algeria primarily, in the region called the Ahagar. We have Rh negative people. Now, this has been also the lamas of Tibet were anciently considered to be blue, the ancient lamas. And we see this manifesting in Western Europe, as the blue bloods, the concept of sacre bleu, the blue bloods. So they're carrying on this idea that there is a blue, a gene for this blue blood, which goes part and parcel to the Rh negative, to the 24th gene pair, a race which once had 24 gene pairs, and a race which is prone to illnesses such as what is called porphyria, where King George III, if you read a book called The Madness of King George III, it will go into detail about his condition, but he used to piss purple, which was called purple rain, and this was part of his condition. Now, there are many different types of porphyria, and I'm certainly not an expert on them, but the idea is that the genes can play games. They can play games, and there is also a disease known as Wilson's disease, which is directly related to copper deficiency in the blood. So in other words, there can be an overcompensation of copper, which can lead to a restriction of copper, or vice versa. But in any case, you have an irregular amount of copper, and this is known as Wilson's disease, which is very much in correlation with all of the synchronicities I encountered with the name Wilson. Furthermore, all of this disease can be tangentially related to an ancient disease in the Bible called Zarat. And this was a skin disease where people began to form white skin, white pustules, sometimes with red spots. This is right out of the Bible. There might be some additional data in it on the Talmud, but it was a condition that was being suffered at the time. We have this biblical character named Moses, and then we have, I think it was Tutmosis III, who has been identified with the Moses in the Bible, Tutmosis, where he is basically being kicked out of Egypt because he has all these people with diseased skin, Zarat, which means the wrath of God, which means they are basically degenerating from a more whole state, which could possibly be those that were left behind in Egypt, which would have been a melanated people who had darker skin. We can argue about whether it was the regular dark skin we see in people today, or we can say that maybe it was blue or a mixture thereof. But this is a tradition in the history of man, and that further this white skin condition, which was in no small part a lack of melanin, had to do with people degenerating in their mental function. So you have in the story of Moses, you have a story of this religion which seems to be an attempt to consolidate knowledge, to preserve knowledge, to custodian knowledge, to be a custodian of knowledge, and wrapped up in a construct that we call the Holy of Holies, and it comes into a form of a Ark of the Covenant inside the Holy of Holies, which will emit a certain flame paranormal flame, for lack of a better word, once a year, and it comes in the form of a Pez dispenser. In other words, it's only the high priest can see it, and he can pop the Pez dispenser under certain conditions. It is something that is limited to the experience of humanity. We have been limited, and there is only a very particular person who is the administrator of this particular, what's called the Shekinah, which is the feminine energy. The Shekinah means dwelling, but it also is reference to the feminine energy. The flame that is emitted from the between the cherubs or cherubs of the Ark of the Covenant is the flame, which is called the Shekinah glory, which is also personified into the character we know Jesus when Christianity comes around. So that all relates to this ancient tradition, and it's interesting. And Andrew, I think you might comment, interestingly enough, on how mystery schools preserve data and what their function is in relation to a historical construct, which I've just given you. This is history. Whether it's true or not is beside the point. It's a historical writings of man that point out all this stuff. So what do you have to say about it from a mystery school perspective, Andrew?
Well, mystery schools, their original 0-point function was for people to learn the immortality process in a family structure. And the immortality process is you reach an age in which you know you're going to cross over to the other side, and you begin to form a series of rituals that your family members will perform on you, and on your death, you'll go to the astral world, complete your contracts, and then you will come back into the lineage one generation later in one of the children of the lineage. This is known as lineage technology. This is how we are able to string past life to past life and grow soul family members and structural family members so that we can build dynasties. At a small scale, when you are born into a family and you are not in a dynasty, you are following the path that the soul is creating to make soul contracts, etc., etc. In a series I did specifically on DNA, which you can get on my Galactic Historian YouTube channel, just on the Galactic History shows, you'll see DNA with Natalie and DNA 2, where I will go full into explaining what DNA lineage technology is. But as a sum up here, it is the immortality process. And the mystery schools were the one that began teaching this en masse to large volumes of our people as a spiritual technology so that a reincarnation grid could be imprinted on top of the original system of immortality birthing into your lineage. This is where we have a splitting of the lineages and one person taken from one lineage and forced into another to resolve karma for other lineages. We get into a more advanced concept where the actual mystery schools are leapfrogging through time with their master, looking for who can survive 1, 2, or 3 lifetimes in a row, getting reborn into their family, so they can be taught the next level of hierarchical spiritual information that allows them to manipulate time on a different scale, for the consciousness of the being to scale through time, instead of the physical body going through the life, death, and rebirth process, with the great forgetting as the filter to assist you in the growth process. So mystery schools hold the torch of immortality and have been teaching it throughout time, leapfrogging for both good and for both bad, because they are equally good and bad, and they cannot be one without the other, because their original 0-point function was to share in a community the problems of light and dark, so there could be a resolution and a middle ground and a common moral code of experiencing in this light reality that was based in DNA technology by our progenitors 1,200,000 years ago, who created this form of DNA as a way for consciousness to pack in all of its experiences and take it like a backpack from planet to planet, lifetime to lifetime, based off of what stream of time or scale of time they were connecting to, whether it was solar system time, local planet time, galactic time, or center of universe time, meaning the soul was functioning at the highest levels of DNA expression, because DNA is the foundation of every part of our universe.
Well, there was one point I wasn't clear on. It is that, so when the key for the immortals in the mystery school tradition is, it's not as important to maintain a physical body on a particular planet, but it's to maintain a consistency of, or continuity of memory that would not only extend from one lifetime to one lifetime, it would be much grander than that. It would be to able to retain a consciousness across time itself.
Yes, absolutely.
And
so that one could view time.
So we could say that the average person that would look into reincarnation and says, oh boy, I want to come back as a millionaire, he might, it's rather short-sighted, because even if he could do that, he's playing like a little game. He's like playing in one little game over here, whereas when you get from the bigger to the bigger arena, you're seeing all the games played, and you have a continuity of memory to see all the different games being played, and it puts you sort of in a godlike condition. But then we know from common experience, without even getting up to that level, when you get up to that level or aspire to that level, you're going to find what's called rivalry. What do you have to say about that?
That is called the hierarchical order. And the hierarchical order has been instilled in our world for the distinct process of resolving karma through the use of DNA as the vehicle to hold spiritual debt from lifetime to lifetime. These are spiritual contracts that come from the soul family, or created by a soul, or created by someone else that's been given to the system, and it's going to continuously hand out this debt. So when one begins to see the bigger picture, they realize they can take whatever debt's being given to them and put it to previous generations, current generations, or future generations. So you have the ability to manipulate spiritual debt around you in a hierarchical order that creates a pecking order of students, that create cult of personalities around mystery schools such as the Pope and any other iteration expression of that concept. On a smaller scale, you have warriors who create warrior mystery schools. In thousands of years ago, we had super soldiers. They were just trained by the sword and magic instead of technology.
Yes, but this puts us, when you talk about spiritual debt or karmic debt, whatever you want to call it, this is no different than the idea of money lenders.
Yep.
And manipulating people with money in the political world.
Yes.
So,
it is the Babylonian money curse that was created by the Babylonian expression, and its purpose was to cross spiritual levels because they knew DNA lineages were incarnating over and over again. And if they put a scenario that one debt, a physical debt, would cross from lifetime to lifetime, that the soul would remember it the next birth that they had.
Well, of course, we don't want to be party to this debt. We want to opt out. We want to opt out, yeah. And what is so to opt out? It's like you could look at it from one perspective and say to opt out of debt, to opt out. Somebody needs to put on mute there. But in any case, we can opt out of DNA. I mean, literally opt out of DNA if we so choose. Any comment?
You can opt out of it at any time. The thing is, what is time? This comes down to the concept that our DNA is a vehicle of light that allows us to scale through time. So if you are 50 million years ago and create a debt, does that debt ever disappear? Or if you pop 7 million years in the future, does that debt come with you? How does it interact with the quantum? That is the abuse of the quantum concept. As long as it's being observed, it's changed. There is another form of spiritual technology that exists within that 24th rung of DNA that allows us to be an unentangled observer. That's that ultimate state you were talking about.
Yes.
And mystery schools taught people how to reach that ultimate state so that they can become an unentangled observer of themselves and shuffle debt around in their own individual consciousness timeline.
Well, that's sort of like balancing your books or paying these accounts.
Or cooking your books, too.
Well, it could be cooking your books, yes. One is still dealing with the questionable system.
Correct. So when it got into that higher consciousness state, what many mystery schools taught in an attempt to break hierarchical orders, what does it take for consciousness to reverse engineer hierarchical order and achieve simultaneous unity or freedom for all beings?
Well, from a human perspective, one can say that one
doesn't like the system, one hates the system, one revolts against the system. And one of the reasons for that is because one is losing at the system.
Yes.
If one learns to play the system and win at the system, one doesn't dislike the system because one has now created circumstances or events to one's advantage.
Absolutely.
So,
the hierarchical pecking order, what mystery schools have been pressed into our culture for tens of millions of years.
And then there are some people who could say be on top of the game, but then not be happy that they don't have more of the pie, and then they become
more of the pie, or some other version of themselves has gone rogue and is in competition with them for their slice of the pie. And this happens frequently.
Well, yes, and the unfortunate, what this is, it can create or bring about disharmony and disunion for the individual.
And it's why so many mystery schools experience personal betrayals, because it's a hierarchical order and the beings aren't trying to reverse the hierarchical order.
Well, yes.
It's inevitable.
And it becomes a question of what is one's personal quotient of harmony that one wants to experience and deal with.
Exactly. Personal quotient of harmony. That's the individual person's experience and choice of, to be a negative Nancy or a positive Paul each day. Attitude is everything in this world. It is.
What does Laura Lee have to say about all this?
Laura Lee is wishing her coworkers would pipe down a little, but they're Christmas partying here. My thought on the whole idea of hierarchy is that it has its place. Because I am coming from a mystery school tradition, my reliance on genetic engineering is not some external force tinkering with the genetics to give us, say, 24 chromosome pairs. We rely on the epigenetics, on the thought processes that people are willing to engage in and the work they are willing to put in to change themselves. Because as you change yourself in your mind, your genetics will change to correspond.
Absolutely.
You don't need to know what the chromosome pairs look like. You don't need to know how many strands of DNA you've got. You need to work from the core idea that you are going to be attuned to source. And as the BOTA motto says, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. You let God do it.
At the same time, when you are experiencing that consciousness, the next level of human expression as the I am presence, who will then be all of our past, present, and future lives simultaneous. We have many versions of ourselves who exist in something that isn't anywhere near our Roman numeral frequency of time. They looked at time completely different. And when that I am presence being passed on the torch of I am presence to the next lifetime, and the next lifetime, and the next lifetime, there is a chain of consciousness or a stream of linked consciousnesses that form the genetic structures and rungs, and they become our personal spiritual teachers in ourselves. Sometimes they become in competition with us because they achieved a lifetime where they didn't need to go to the astral world. They could go in between, someplace in between where they weren't in a frequency of time because their DNA allowed them to do that from the advanced experiencing. And they use their skills to influence other versions of themselves to make choices, manipulating oneself like a long game of chess. And this is where souls began to plan lifetimes 5, 6, or 7 times lifetimes ahead, or 1,000 lifetimes ahead, which took some of the power of the I am presence away, and it used the reincarnation system, which was just another structure built by the God system, because it was still a belief order, so that human beings can go through a bigger resolution of race karma, things that the planet had been a part of for many millions of years. This incorporated our DNA into the bigger scale teachings of mystery schools, which was how to create our reality in the now, and then to alter our past, present, and future as the being of the now.
Well, when you say this, it reminds me of somebody going to Disneyland and liking the Jungle Boat ride so much that he gets stuck in the Jungle Boat rides, and
ends up doing his career working on the Jungle Book.
Pretty much, yeah.
And this is what humanity is sort of. And so when you're planning out, you go from the design and planner of Disney World and all these different worlds and fantasies into basically one focus fantasy and say Adventureland, and he hears rumors that there might be a place called Tomorrowland, and it's yes, it's a very limited path that we are invited or predisposed to move into.
Right, because it is the fullest expression of hierarchical order in a 100% free will universe and a 100% free will galaxy on a 100% free world planet where each being has 100% contrast control and contract control of themselves.
Now, I want to say something about hierarchical. Hierarchical is something that is sometimes a pejorative word, the way it's used. We all have to deal with hierarchy. But it's very interesting if you break down the word hierarchy, you have hiero, like as in hiero, which is
like hierophant.
Sacred. Well, yes, but hiero, like as in a hieroglyphic, is sacred writings, sacred hiero, like the hierophant.
Or a revealer of the sacred, which is the hierophant. Yes.
Yep.
But with the hiero part, but the other part of hierarch is arc, which is like the arch, the arc. So it's like the sacred arc, and not necessarily. The arc represents the top, the arch, arctos, the high point. So we have, and that's where we have, arctos is related to the word bear, which comes from the constellations in the skies to the north. But it's interesting because the whole part of when we talk about hierarchy. And we could be talking about the hierarchy in a corporate structure of a corrupt company. We could be talking about the hierarchy of a church. We could talk about the hierarchy of a football team. But the way, when we're dealing with structure, we're dealing with basically a builder, in an arch. The Freemasons have their arch. It's representative of the builder, and it's representative of the genus of creation. So when we begin to, and I've had my episodes where I've gone and to speak at events where we had the biggest storm in the history of New Jersey. I was to meet with Al Bielek, Preston Nichols, and Duncan Cameron. This is the last time the four of us would be together, and we had the biggest storm in the history of New Jersey. And Duncan and I were able to get there on time. And another time, I went to introduce a very well-known author, Catherine Neville, to the Moors, to my Moorish friend, Sid Catlett. And we were to meet on a sacred, I think it was a cathedral of the Sacred Heart or something of a similar name, a very famous cathedral in Washington, D.C. When I got there, I could not literally get there because the trees were blocking the streets and the traffic lights were not working. This was in July, in the middle of summer. And I then got there. We had to park and walk around the trees and get there. And Sid says to me, he says, "What the hell are you doing? What the hell are you bringing here?" He says, "We had the biggest storm in the history of Washington, D.C. Ice storm. It was an ice storm in the middle of July." And it was coincident with certain information that was being released. These are not the only instances. These are two. There were other incidents surrounding this. So in other words, when you begin to say buck the authority, or even, and I didn't feel like I was bucking the true authority. I thought I was bucking the dam bill. And you come up across this and you get a whip back from this energy. We're always dealing with hierarchy. But when we begin to question the hierarchy and we begin to get outside, look under the wizard's cape or fool around with his what do you call a wizard stick? A wand. We begin to play with his wand like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. We get a recoil from the hierarchy as if it may not be talking to us, but it's acknowledging that we're there. and you have to acknowledge that it's there. And you see the power of it is so limitless. I've seen this time and again. Not frequently, but it happens with enough repetitive to where you identify it.
I see it frequently with the types of material that I bring out that hasn't been in race memory for a long time. And what I label this is called pushback. There are times that no good deed goes unpunished, especially in this world where all right, that is our break, everyone. We're going to be back in just about 4 minutes, so everyone hold that thought, go take a chance, get some bathroom break, and we'll be right back. A very special time traveler webinar, which will become available on the 3rd of January, which is going to be a very, very special date. Welcome back, Peter and Laura Lee.
Thank
Hello.
you, sir.
Hello.
I did have something I wanted to say in the context of the mystery schools, which we had left off on. The whole idea of a hierarchical structure in normal human terms leaves us with something to strive for to attain the next level, sort of a carrot and a stick thing, advancement and recognition and all that. But it isn't really that way. The striving always results in additional spiritual growth, and that takes off at some point as the individual becomes inner directed. Centered in that I am consciousness, they no longer are referring to the rest of the hierarchical structure as something that's over them. They are an active co-administrator of it. And the nature of the great work changes from advancing oneself to advancing the whole of humanity. And that is the definition of the great work, and which is attainment of liberation for all aspects of the human consciousness.
But it's still an individual journey through the work that can only be shared so other people can choose to go through that experience of the great work.
Yes.
And that's the conundrum of hierarchical order. It is both good and bad, because there are things that people don't want to go through, and the purpose of the mystery schools is to guarantee a roller coaster ride of a lifetime, whether you're on your front seat of the roller coaster, with your arms up in the air, both good and bad, intermixed. So one that can go on a regular path of contrast control.
And bearing in mind, of course, that resistance always builds strength.
Correct. I mean, that which does not kill you lifetime to lifetime to lifetime makes you stronger.
Yes.
But after a while, being killed in a certain way, there are wounds and traumas that could take 50 lifetimes to heal.
Or you just get over it.
You just get over it. But in today's world, we see a repetitive soul disorder where souls went through so much trauma and were trapped for so long that they can't possibly beat it in one lifetime without the great work directly in their hand with some form of teacher.
Yes.
Which is once again the hierarchical, both doing the good and the bad. Because it can't be one without the other.
The very nature of reality acts in terms of wounding as a goad to do something about the injury.
Correct.
If you're hurt badly enough, you won't just leave it untreated. You will address it.
Correct. But each lifetime is that challenge. Does the trauma just subtly affect you, or is there an active healing of it?
We all have trauma. We
Yes.
all have this to get over.
Yes,
all
we
of
all
our
do.
little yes. So
Each soul has an individual journey through the great work. And each soul has a mission each lifetime to find the great work on their own, to interpret it on their own, to experience it on their own, and to ultimately share it before there is some form of matter-to-energy transformation, whether it's death or ascendance.
granted.
Did I say something here, Andrew?
Sure.
I relate some of my own experiences because I came into this world with this, I guess it was a horoscope and a predisposition towards athletics. And when I moved and had all of my, I guess, support systems knocked out from under me when I was a sophomore in high school. I had no support system. I was forced to and into a school which was not really was intellectually oriented as opposed to athletically oriented. I had to carve out and discover an intellect. Fortunately, I was able to find that I did have that capacity because if I didn't, I don't know what I would have thought of myself. And I didn't really have a particularly high opinion of myself at all. But it was nevertheless a form of development. And then I began to open up as my intellect got sharper, I began to open up which was outside the realm of mundane intellect by all the mundanity of all the great scholars of the world. Not that they were all mundane, but at least the way it was presented to us was in a mundane form. So I then began to experience or look for the esoteric. And that led me to the, I guess what you would call the double-edged sword of the Scientology movement, in which we had processes whereby we were oriented to look at that which, one could call past lives. But in all of this, in this past life sojourns, there was never anything that was definitive or concrete about it by the very nature of what we were trying to do. We were not setting to prove that we had been so-and-so in 1642. That was not the purpose. The only purpose, the only stated purpose was to heal the wounds inside of one's head. And when one heals the wounds inside of one's head, which could be manifesting in the body as a psychosomatic illness, one could be, one is using their imagination or the function of the imagination or the function that's associated with the imagination. This was not anything that was one was not aware of, unless one was particularly myopic or just stupid. But and just like as I learned in martial arts, the more successful you are in martial arts, the more you are using your imagination. It's just that imagination will have a concrete ripple effect in the physical world. So it was when one is stretching out into the imagination and looking at what one might term past existences and how they might inflict upon specifically a psychosomatic condition that one is experiencing. What I found as an individual who was not prone to religion, was not religious, was interested in mythology and interested in religions, but was not religious in a sense of a parishioner, and was very much opposed to the typical ideas of religion. And not being predisposed towards metaphysics, I began to discover a framework whereby I could imagine most anything I want, but the imagination had a certain tractability to it or tangibility, where here I came into this world not thinking of the past, not thinking there was a past beyond when I was born, and then being able to invent a past, if not tap into an actual past, where I could see that I could accomplish in this lifetime, I had accomplished in this lifetime what I'd never been able to accomplish in maybe thousands of incarnations, mostly because of ignorance and stupidity of particular common sense type activities. And this sort of it was an avenue that was opened up to me by circumstance. And also that circumstance was opened up to me by my studies and curiosities and reading. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, how can I come into this incarnation and figure all this stuff out when I was not even planning to do any of this? It just kind of happened, and one sort of situation feeds the other, and here I am, many years later, 40 years later, writing about the actual math and physics of time travel and demystifying it. So this is
40 years of synchronicities?
Over a long period. In other words, they don't happen. It's not like a movie.
They're
where
not linear.
90 minutes.
They aren't linear, and they are all synchronicities that create a resolution or a resonant analog frequency at the end, meaning 22 books, that's Peter Moon.
Well,
or
yes.
the years of experience of Laura Lee, et cetera, et cetera.
But I want to say something here because and ask something because, like, say my revelation to so much of this happened by circumstance and towards my life path. In your case, you had a download at the baseball stadium in Cleveland, whereby you all of a sudden became psychically aware. So. Right.
Aware of time.
But prior to that incident, or would you say that you kind of came into this by circumstance?
No. It was leading up. There were a series of events that led up to the baseball game where things that I would do as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old were completely impossible, and no one in my family structure had the coping skills to deal with it, whether it was spontaneous information or spontaneous medical diagnosis, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so you kind of were born with it. But when did you become, I guess, aware that you were doing something here in this world that was out of the ordinary?
About 4 weeks after the baseball game, when everything began to settle in the spiritual guides that were not entangled with me. They were unentangled observers using spiritual technology to make sure I didn't make choices erratically or too fast, that I allowed it to simply settle in. So the perspective wasn't a 9-year-old perspective. It was essentially access to all other versions of consciousness of myself that were already uploaded into the unity. So it was a matter of understanding the interface and perspective in which I was working with.
A digestion process.
Yeah,
digestion process.
Exactly. So as I grew into that, about a month afterward is where the adult concept of I am interacting with time and all other versions of myself are simultaneously existing. And at this moment, signature frequency now, my words are very important because it will echo throughout all my frequency of time, because that had become my perspective at the moment of the baseball game, because it wasn't just the people in the stadium, it was everyone that was watching the game in the archive, the live or future, or who would ever have a memory of it. I was linked into that signature frequency of time on Lake Erie, which was its own massive generation of water that had pre-programmed from tens of thousands of other generations in it. So I understood I was speaking through time to myself, and that I could begin to organize all of my other time selves to begin distributing energy based off of what records I began to read, because it was a challenge of how do you help a race with amnesia begin to remember themselves when many of them don't have a metaphysical or esoteric practice in knowingness to begin that process of healing it or becoming aware of it.
Okay, let me ask Laura Lee. You must have had some experience down the line by reason of your studies. You must have something to say about your own experience in this regard.
I've had several experiences. I would regard them all as being steps forward and a wider blooming out on the path, but things have been introduced to me by stages, and it's the initiatory system at work. I'm very much part of the mystery school tradition, and its work in the positive sense brings individuals to the point where they see the overall plan and the overall unity and the pieces they still have to reconcile and bring into unity, and they consciously choose to undertake the disciplines that will bring that about. So
okay.
That's where I'm at.
Would you like to share anything in particular, like Andrew and I did, or?
Well, okay. It was my first introduction to the higher self. And what I had been doing was driving to work in Houston every day, which was a trial in and of itself, except my practice was to play Enya songs sing along with them as though it was my music and I had written it. And it wasn't. It was just an imaginative exercise. It made the whole drive to work much merrier than it otherwise would have been. And as I drove along, to kind of send out good vibes to all my fellow travelers on the thoroughfares of Houston. And that practice had continued for some months at that point, and I was aware of myself being watched, and I was aware of two beings as though they were standing on the roadside, but they were energy beings, and they were about 12 feet tall, and they were watching me. And they said, this has been pretty consistent. I think she's ready. And the other one said, yeah, let's see what she does tomorrow. Because they knew I was aware of them. And I didn't stop what I was doing. I was back in my old groove again the next day, heading up I-10 towards my job, and doing the same old thing. And there that watcher was again. And they reached out and opened the doors to me. It was an initiatory moment. I was shown the higher self, and that energy poured down through me, this golden amber light, and it looked at every part of my being, cellular structure, psychological structures, everything, and accepted and loved all of it as good, even the stuff I had judgments about. And when I got to work, again, my pattern had been disrupted. I didn't know quite in a conscious way what had happened. It too needed to settle down and be digested. But I had a smile on my face that I couldn't wipe off. Not for anything. I mean, if my face became tranquil for a while because I was busy with something, as soon as I returned to a normal state, it was with this brilliant smile on it. It was the most astonishing time, and it took about 3 months to calm down and get back into a normal sort of framework and understand what had happened. And initiation is like that. It shows you what the next step will produce.
That's a beautiful story, and it's a remarkable story. And I want to say something. I have often, many of the people I have had cause to traffic with or chose to traffic with me have been subject to communication with energy beings, but it's usually not so positive, and they end up and I find your story pleasantly positive, but also uniquely positive. I know there are others, but it's not usually what gets bandied about,
No, it doesn't get bandied about, and I tell it because, one, I was asked, and two, it's my experience to share. I've encountered the idea that if you share spiritual experiences, you lose some of their impact. But I don't find that's true. In remembering it, in reliving it, I can process it further, and it reemphasizes to me my commitment to the path I'm on and to explaining something of it to others, because that kind of inner contact is typical of the occult path, particularly in its positive branch. I was contacting on two masters of the inner school, and the initiatory experience was very much showing me the goal of my life's work.
I would also like to point out that we cannot leave Enya out of this, because the Celtic music, I'm not a particular fan of it.
Very fourth ray, very nature-oriented, yes.
Yeah, I'm not a particular fan, but I certainly have admiration for her music. And it's very moving. And I would say that, her music is probably designed to create such transformational experiences in people, and I don't know at what level she intends it, but it works through her muse.
Right.
So it's
music induces states of consciousness, and I was certainly using it in that way.
You were using the good work to co-create with yourself an initiation.
Yeah, but something else had happened in my life, too. That was the week after I started doing the Builders of the Aditoms sound and color course. And I had begun to do the sound and color correlation with intoning the notes and looking at the colors and imagining the colored energies out in the direct sunlight. And that I think had a tremendous impact too. It gave me the energetic state that unfolded in that moment.
Go ahead.
I just had somebody wander by making inquiries that didn't need to be made, in my opinion. But it was very much analogous to the experience that Paul had on the road to Damascus, was it? Where he got a vision of the Christos. It was that I joked about it for years. It was the vision on the road to Rose Electronics.
So something I want to say about the mechanics of your experience. When you were using the Enya music as that personal co-creation with your imagination to create the good works process of individual experiencing, you created a placenta around yourself of self-energy that give you the protected state with that music and all the colors and numerations that's associated with it, so that your crown chakra could do what it's actually meant to do. Become the portal of safe communication to other versions of yourself who have guides and teachers around them who are there in non-competition to teach you the process of self-exploration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In a nutshell, that's what happened to me. It was just, its time frame was very short. For a while, I learned a language, and the only way I can describe it, I was a 900-year 9-year-old for about 5 months. And then it transitioned out of me. It was done. It had gone all to cellular memory, as if I had completely 100% experienced it all. All right, that's our bottom of the hour break. Everyone will be back in just about 3 minutes, so refill your drink, hop to the bathroom if you want. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everyone. We are continuing our conversation here on our Time Traveler webinar that is going to be available come January the 3rd, 2016. Once again, I'm joined by Laura Lee Solomon and Peter Moon. We've had an incredible show today, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, you're welcome. And I have a very interesting story. That this is a perfect venue for, because it was Laura Lee talking about energy beings. Well, I have an encounter with an energy being, and I don't know if I've ever told this story. If I did, it won't be quite like the way I'm going to tell it now. And it has to do with Montauk and Camp Hero. And I want to get your read on this, Andrew, because you'll find it very interesting. And of course, if you have anything to chime in, Laura Lee, I'll be happy to hear that as well. But I have a friend from Italy who he visited me on my first trip to Romania. He suffered through the train rides or whatever he had to do to get to Romania. And he visited me in the United States, and he wanted to go out to Montauk. Now, I don't generally go out to Montauk too much anymore, because sort of that investigation has sort of done what it was supposed to do. But occasionally I will go out there if I'm with somebody and they particularly want to go. So in any case, I took him out there, and this particular individual has had a lot of challenges in his life, and he had a character in his life who was involved in Freemasonry and was kind of like heavy on his case, and it was not good. And I began to see that whoever this Freemason was bad news for him. And he didn't seem to quite get it. But then as we went out to Montauk, we visited some friends of mine who are a mother and her daughter, who are both psychic. And as we sat there, there was a a boarder in the house, and he walks in. No, I met the boarder, but I did not talk to him on that particular visit because that visit has a sequel to it. The mother was complaining about this man she knew, and was basically a Satanist, and she was talking about all this negative things with him. And then while she's talking, her phone rings, and her daughter, who does not live in the house, who has her own house, answers the phone. And I immediately said, "That's the guy. Don't answer it. That's the guy." And sure enough, the daughter did answer it, and it was the guy. And her mother proceeded to reprimand her. How can you be so stupid? You are such a stupid soul sometimes, she says to her. And so we had this live sort of satanic frequency sort of impinging upon us for whatever reason. And then we went to eat dinner. And when we ate dinner, it was a very crowded summer night at Montauk. And as I began to eat dinner with my Italian friend, I began to see how all roads sort of led to Montauk, and I figured out it was very crystal clear that this friend of his in the Masonic hierarchy of Italy, because as he explained his position in the hierarchy of Freemasonry, this man's father was a Mason. It was very clear that this guy would have absolutely had to have known the character known as Signor, which is his real name, Mazzini, who was a member of an Italian Freemason lodge, who was the one who was responsible for opening up the chambers beneath the Sphinx in the book Transylvania Sunrise. Would have had to have known him. I said, well, this is too much of a synchronicity. I basically know one person. I may have another one. I have a personal friend in Italy, one basically, who happens to know this guy, and he visited me. This Italian visited me in Romania, and then he's with me at Montauk, and everything comes together. So then we go back to the daughter's house because we're going to spend the night there, and he wants to see the Montauk base, and I say, well, and she dead fast refuses to go out there. She says, I'm not going out there. It's too creepy. No, not at night. No. And her boyfriend wouldn't go out there either. So she says, no, I won't go out there. You can't go out there. So he wanted to go. So it was about 11:30 at night. We went out to Camp Hero, and it's pitch black. And then I turned right into what we call the front entrance to the base, where you would enter front, and it has these signs, do not enter, do not go past this point. So I drive on past that point, knowing, well, sort of the whereabouts I am, and I see the fence is closed. I thought the fence might be open, and if it was open, I would have just gone through, because you can get in through the back. They now let the public in there. So anyway, I checked, but as soon as I went past the forbidden sign, this car came out of nowhere and started to follow me. And this is where the energy beings come in. The car is following me. When I begin to do a U-turn, and it's obvious that I'm not going to try and violate their security any further than I have, they turn around and they go out to the main highway and they turn left, which means they're going back towards the town of Montauk, which is about 6 or 7 miles away. Now, had they turned right, I would have known they were going to either the lighthouse parking lot, the lighthouse itself, or doing the back entrance to Camp Hero. So I sit there, I say, I don't like that car. I say to my friend, and I say, we're going to go park over here by the house section. They have some old base housing where people live. And I go down that road so I don't have to enter out on the highway. And I go to where they have this little soccer field, and they have this house that used to be a senior citizens house that they built for no apparent reason other than to bus senior citizens in from half an hour away and have them play checkers. It was really a strange place. Well, now they discontinued the senior citizens, and somebody bought the house, and the place was packed with cars. I've never seen the place packed with cars. It made no sense. So I park up, and the guy who apparently was the owner of the house, he looked Asian, and he looked like a fisherman, and he waves his hand at me like, hey, hello. This is not a typical way that people act in Montauk. They don't say hello to you. They're rather estranged from normal feelings. Even the tourists, the summertime dwellers, they might be a little friendly, but it's a weird place. So in any case, and I don't expect people to sing hello to somebody who's in a car and it's dark and they can't even see who's in the car. So in any case, I waited for about 45 minutes, hoping that whatever car was pursuing us was out. So when I drove out, thinking they were gone, instead of turning to the left and back town, I was going to take my friend into the base, into the inner base in the darks of night. I turned right. Now, out of the ditch, it looked like it was out of a ditch because I'm watching it in the rear view mirror. I see this car emerge, almost as if it jumped. Now, cars don't jump. And it was jumping from apparently the right side of the highway. So, and it could have switched areas to get a more strategic location, but it had its headlights off, and when I passed to the right, it jumped, and it began to follow me. When it followed me, and I had the chance to turn off into the Montauk base, I decided not to turn off into the Montauk base because I didn't know who these people were, and I turned to go towards the lighthouse and the lighthouse parking lot. So this car then turns right into the base. I then do a full circle loop around the lighthouse area and come back to where I can go back into that area. The car does not appear. It does nothing. It's as if it just didn't happen. I waited long enough for it to do a full loop around, waited a good while, probably 15 minutes. Then I go back into where the car went, and I'm following it now, and I'm saying, where the hell is this car? Now, I know that area pretty well. I went to what's called the fisherman's parking lot. There was nobody there at all. Sometimes you'll see fishermen there at odd hours of the night. There were no vehicles. Then I went into the base. This is going into the inner core of the base, thinking, where is this car going to be? There is no way that car literally had to have disappeared or have gone into a place that it's almost impossible to want to go into. So this was very odd, and we went and looked around the base, and there were no events other than that. But these, one of my friends who had a lot of experience with these energy beings said that's exactly what they were. She's called them aliens, or they were energy beings that wanted me to know that they were watching me. And Andrew, that's my experience. Is a very weird experience. And of course, when I got back to the daughter's house, she says, well, what do you expect? Do you have any comment on that, Andrew?
Yes. So from your beginning of your story, we were talking about the daughter answering the phone, and it's that guy. Right. It's like when an announcer on baseball says, a brand new rookie, first at bat, watch him hit a home run, and he hits a home run. Or a basketball player about to make a free throw that wins the game, and he's got a 99%, free throw rate, and he misses it. So what was going on was an identity of the signature frequency that you were being observed and watched, and you called it out at that moment.
Right, because I'm very familiar. Like when I'm on,
you're very familiar with your own self energies. So as the story progresses and you find yourself on the road with the particular individual, that person was creating or in unknowingness co-creating with that dark source that had already made itself available, which then gave the portal for the observers to follow you around so that experience can be told.
Well, they might have been following him more than me, and then I also realized in between those incidents that his mentor, who's now passed away, would have known this Signor Mazzini, this super evil guy, part of the Bilderbergers and part of,
right. And those things have multidimensional watchers that are set up from their magical cults to make sure that people in their lineage or in their possible network of betrayers are watched.
Okay, there's an interesting sequel to what happened. So I don't know whether it was a year later, probably a year later. that I had two of my Bulgarian friends, because I've adventured to Bulgaria, and I have my publisher in Bulgaria visited me along with his girlfriend, who was also my translator, and they're both very good friends. I had spent time in Bulgaria, 10 days as well with him, and he's visiting me for the first time, and of course he wants to go out to Montauk, and I take him to these same friends' house again, because they were part Bulgarian and they were part Montauk Indian. So they wanted to meet my Bulgarian friends, and he certainly wanted to meet them. So we go there, and he has this boarder comes out of nowhere. I don't know if he comes from inside the house or outside the house, and he lays these two holy Bibles on the table, and he kind of smacks them on the table. He says, I got these from Ken. Boom. And I think the guy's name was Ken. Yeah, Ken was the owner of the hotel who hosted the seminar with Dave when David Anderson actually appeared out there. So this owner of the hotel did get to meet David Anderson, and apparently these were two Bibles that he didn't need because they donate these Bibles to to stick in the rooms. So this guy brought two Bibles home. He smacked them on the table and walked away. He was gone. And I said, why did he do that? I asked the mother. She says, I don't know. I said, is he into the Bible? She says, no. I said, does he, is this typical behavior for him? She goes, no. And then I realized what the two Bibles did was sort of a correspondent action to the satanic phone call from a year or two earlier. It kind of cleansed the energy. It was like, boom. And I said, oh, that's what this is. That's what those two Bibles are. They're there to kind of wipe out that negative energy from the year before.
See, what you were seeing there is a spiritual contract that the individual who brought the Bibles had to you and the other person that was there to witness at quite literally as a mystical experience, even though he did it because it was literally a spiritual contract. His soul said that had to be done.
Well, it was my Bulgarian friends were the recipients of the witness. My Italian friend was no longer with me, of course, right. and although the two of them did meet when we were in Romania my first time, but it was a very I guess it had a happy ending, you might say.
But the Bibles were from that part of Europe, right?
No. This was America. The Bibles were they were American Bibles printed in America for American Hotel. This was at Montauk.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah, this was, but it was just, and it reminds me of Douglas. For those people who haven't heard the DVD, Satan's Crusaders, which is an excellent, where Douglas goes into his tales about neutralizing an occult ritual by using a Bible on the Presidio base to neutralize this occult ritual that was basically designed to kill him. And he had them they couldn't find a Bible on the whole base. They found in one in the children's library, finally. And he used that. So it reminds me of that story that he tells in Satan's Crusaders, which I encourage them to get that from DouglasDietrich.com if you haven't heard it already. But that's just an interesting story.
That's DDDietrich.com.
Okay, all right.
D.D. Dietrich.
So that's my story, and this is that's probably an adventure. I did write about it in one of my newsletters, but it's not one I've ever had occasion to tell. And it, as I say, it ties to energy beings, and energy beings are something that can come out of the woodwork in one visits the sacred areas of Transylvania where I've been. That's a whole nother.
They can come out of the woodwork anywhere.
Well, that's true. They have a high predisposition to do that in that area.
Yeah, and it's the basic frequency that you are either working with or have around you that kind of draws whatever is around into your presence or not.
Correct. We are a nexus point for other consciousness interactions that have various forms of energy contracts, spiritual contracts, or etheric energy exchange systems that keep us entangling our reality together. This is the shared reality rules. So when beings of other density and other dimension want to tune into us on a signature frequency of time and interlope or interact or intercede on our behalf or do negative to us, these unknown, unaware sides of these shared reality rules create manifestation effects where we can begin to observe these beings even though they don't think we can observe them.
Well, this is all fascinating because as I look over the events that have transpired in my own life, I had some pretty sensational dreams at one point with David Anderson in them, and he's in my office and he's playing a tape recorder, and these tape recorder has the secrets of time travel, and then it was so mysterious, and then they were gone. They were erased, and I couldn't get them. And it was so frustrating in the context of the dream. What was the secret? Oh, this was part of my work. Well, here it is, a handful of years later, and I'm actually producing the tapes, only they're not tapes, they're going to be video. So it's very interesting, and it was so enigmatic at the time of the dream. So I guess my message is to people listening, when you have an incredible dream, there's no limitations. And this is back to what Laura Lee was talking about earlier with resistance and damming the blocks. Because, as I say, I will reiterate that a dam is like to be damned, and to be in this world is sometimes a metaphor for being damned. So you need to, one of the things, as I say, we practice in Qigong is to cultivate heaven on earth. And that begins with awareness and expanding your consciousness so that you can create desirable living circumstances that are pleasant to you, pleasant to your soul, and pleasant to those who are around you. And this is part of the real work. And of course, when we tackle some of the subject we've been talking about, it becomes interesting. It becomes fun.
It does. It becomes very, very fun because it allows us to look at the experience with such a unique perspective.
And by the way, I've got to tell you something because I may forget about it when we're talking privately. You're going to Mexico soon, and are you aware that there is this incredible crystal cavern in Mexico?
Yes.
Okay. Are you going to be near there when you go?
I can be. It's not far from where I'm going to be staying. I've actually spoken about it in a number of shows. The Deep Underground Crystal Cavern, the one that's like a half mile down.
Well, I would suggest that you maybe consider going.
I've had an opportunity to visit the largest crystal collection in the world that's here in Seattle. It's a private collection, and it's going to be touring the world here in 2016 and 2017. And when I mean the largest crystal, there are crystals in there that are 4,700 pounds. They're giant. They're, a story and a half tall. And I spent a tremendous amount of time working with those crystals, and then a number of others that I've assembled into tools that I got from Quartzsite, Arizona. So there is a very unique opportunity for me to visit other crystalline sites, one in Brazil also, that it's about 200 feet under the ground, and it's a very special place. I am in this decision point where what is vacation and what is spiritual vacation. So it's a matter of personal choice there. But I have visited some very special places in this world, and I want to let people know that the crystal community is always working with you at all times. It's just a matter if you're choosing to understand which scale they're working with you, whether it's assisting synchronicity or you temporary carrying a little bit of crystal energy so till you meet someone else and then they pass it on to someone else and someone else and someone else. And it is never there to draw energy away from you, but to share its experience with you, because it is a being in unity that is waiting for its cycle to live on this surface Earth.
Well, I have a little story when we talk about crystals because we're coming down to the end time here. I was my last day in Romania one year, and there was sort of a day to kill, and most people were going to
go on over to the museum. And I was going to use this day to rest. And what happened is through circumstances, I connected with this lady who's an American, and she was working on a Fulbright scholarship program where she would teach art students in Transylvania. And she happened to be in our hotel that morning because a friend of hers was on the trip with me. And circumstances, they said, okay, we're going to a crystal shop. And the only reason I was invited or there was room in the car was because the woman I wanted to see that day had holed up in her. She was with us on the trip. It was the only agenda I had was to talk to her because we'd been in a cave the day before, and I wanted to correlate with her on the experience. But she was holed up in her room. She was going into seclusion for the day, so I got to take her place in the car, and we went to this incredible crystal shop in Bucharest called Crystalia, which was just you can look it up if you're ever in Bucharest and go there. And the man, his name is Vasily Daniel. He'd only spoke Romanian. He'd lived in the United States. He escaped during communist times to America and was housed by a Romanian boxer in the city of Los Angeles. So he was just such a wonderful man. He gave us all huge crystals, and he just became our friend, and it was like, wow. He opened up his shop about 10 o'clock at night the following year, and it was just like, wow, who would think there's this incredible crystal shop in Bucharest of all places? And it's amazing to see some of the people that come out of the woodwork sometimes when you do these sacred journeys. That was a day when the sacred journey was all done. We were just waiting for a day to kill, and all of a sudden the amplification of the sacred energy went way up, and it turned into sort of a new friend.
Okay, we are going to have to call it an end of the show. Peter, thank you so much. Laura Lee had to run. Her Christmas party was already calling her. Thank you, Laura Lee. We will be back next Monday at 2 to 4 Eastern Time. So if you want to get a hold and become a part of the Time Traveler webinar, go to galacticnewsnetwork.com, and you can go to the opt-in page, and then you will get the free gifts, and we will be sending the buy page out just shortly. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll be back